And good morning. So this morning I wanted to talk about hair still looks terrible, but it's okay. What I wanted to talk about was the pervasive mentality of many men that no one cares or that the government doesn't care. And if that was the case, that society didn't care about men or that the government didn't care about their people, they literally would not even be going to war to maintain their power so that the American people could have. If these people didn't care about their country and their lot in life, they wouldn't go to the extent that they would to try to do things for them. I mean, shoot, they go to other countries and go to war and sacrifice soldiers' lives so that the American people can have. And every country does that. Today we have a lot of people that talk about how men lack in life. And you get a lot of people that complain from the male perspective about this is terrible for men and men aren't being chosen for work, etc. And I experienced this in the field that I work. I was working as a nurse. Primarily, over 90% of all nurses are women. So I work in a heavy feminized part of the economy where it can be perceived as men not having or men being moved aside so that women can take up a particular uh, lot so that the women can flourish. And when you get around people that constantly complain, that impacts you as a person. When I would go to a hospital and I would ask people, how is the hospital here? Be like, oh, hospital shit, it's terrible here. I'm like, why do you still work here if that's the case? Because that's how things were from their perspective. I would ask people, particular nurses, how is this patient? How is this patient? And they're like, oh, the patient calling all the time. Always needy, etc. And then I'd have conversations with the patient, and I would realize that wasn't the case. And it's because if you hone in and you take up that person's perspective as your own, it becomes very limiting because it's all you see. And that's the purpose of perspective. When people have problems, they take those problems and they're right in front of their face, and it clouds their vision. All they see is what's right directly in front of their face. And people can often unload their perspective onto other people. And so obscure it can obscure the vision of what the reality is. And so I'd walk into some of these hospitals, and even though I got a bad review, I would find out that that wasn't the case. Or I would take up, well, maybe it's my objective to make this place better. If the people aren't so great, well, then maybe it's time to bring a new perspective, a new mindset into the culture that exists instead of constantly feeding into this narrow-minded. I mean, I've told you, I've worked with some of these people that they come into the unit and they don't fit it at all. It was to the point where I had to leave the hospital where I was when I was in New York because I would work one weekend with another group of nurses and I loved it. It didn't feel like it was work. And I enjoyed every minute. We talk bullshit, make fun of each other, and I just have a good time. Where the 12-hour shift flew by. And then I'd work with another group of individuals, and I couldn't stand working there. I hated coming to work. And it wasn't the job, it wasn't the facility, it was the people that I found myself surrounded by. And so I had to move. I had to move because there was no room for me to move to the other weekend. And I said, I can't stand working here. I was like, I'm gonna snap. I'm gonna snap because of the people that were constant complaining, every single weekend. It was always some other complaint about why do we always have to work every weekend? And why does this have to be this way? And and there was nothing that you could do to appease those people. This was, of course, at the height of the BLM, and most of those people that I was working with were either black or Latino. And so you'd get this mindset of the system is against me. I had this one dude that was always talking about how you don't understand how fearful I am leaving my apartment every day. And I'm like, bro, you live in a wealthy white neighborhood. What the hell are you talking about? You sit here and you make 125,000 a year. How are you oppressed? And it's because it's all up here. It's all up here, and that mindset is pervasive. It's like the Apostle Paul said, only a little leaven. It takes a little bit of leaven to ferment the whole loaf. A little bit of yeast causes the dough to rise. And so a little bit of a negative mindset in a unit, like in a hospital or in an office space, it can be pervasive. It can taint and sour a whole people's perspective. And I remember I'd find myself thinking that, because when things would go wrong, that seed of, oh, this place is shit, then comes into your mind. And when people constantly talk about negativity, that negativity is pervasive. It's like an anchor, and it can pull people down. And even though you might not have that mindset, when you are surrounded by people that are like that, it can hold you back. It's the negative a negative mindset is like a cancer. It can grow, and the only thing that you can do as an employer is you have to quickly recognize it, and you have to cut it out immediately, because it can destroy a whole work environment that was once flourishing. And the Bible often talks about that as a person, that there's certain people you just have to cut them out of your life, like gangrene was what like Jesus said, in terms of how stringent a person should be in seeking salvation and making it over to the other side. He said it's better to cut a limb off or to pluck an eye out than to have your whole body thrown into everlasting death, into Gehenna. And it was very, as a poignant principle as a person. You have to think about that from the standpoint of family or from friends, work environments, that yes, they might be your blood. They might be your blood. It might be someone that you've known for a very long time. It might be a favorite content creator. But if you constantly fill your heart with negativity, with these people don't understand this, and society doesn't care, that constant bombarding upon the mind and upon the heart is like a cancer that can grow within an individual, within a group of people, within a city, and within a country. And you have a lot of men today, and a lot of this content gets pushed about how they don't understand us, and the women don't want us, and I'm like, well, then go do something else. As a travel nurse, I would often talk with people who would complain about, well, why don't you move? Why don't you move to another hospital? They're hiring over here. Why don't you move to another city? The pay is here. The cost of living might be a little bit less. Or why don't you do some travel nursing? Why don't you see a bit of the country? Change up your life. And many of these people just don't want to put the effort in, which is the reality. You have a lot of people that just don't want to make any form of effort. They just want to complain. And the Bible says to avoid those people, to avoid them, right? Avoid those who create dissent, because they're like a cancer. They become very pervasive. Their mindset, like seeds of the devil, can be sown in the hearts of men and women, and what they produce is, as Jesus said, thorns and thistles. They contaminate a work environment, and it doesn't take very long for that to happen, because I remember this actually just happened not too recently, where it was a bit of a rough day on the unit and we were short, and then I was having a conversation with the day nurse, and everything that came out of his mouth was negative. Oh, I can't believe this. I can't do this. I'm used to being on this type of unit, and then too many patients, and they call you once, blah, 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 blah. And I can feel that mindset of his starting to pull me down, where I myself started to feel that way. Though my day was just fine. My day was just fine. I didn't experience any of what he had said. But because that was what he had planted in my mind, and I allowed that mindset to grow and start thinking about all this shit, and it's not as clean as it should be, and this and this and that, my day was just fine. I didn't have any issues getting my work done. I had a lot of free time because I was able to get my work done and I was able to get my work completed quickly. I got to spend some time reading, talking with my patients. Didn't have any of that because it wasn't my reality, but I could have made it my reality. And that energy then impacts the unit because then people look at you, they want to, when they look over at you, they see you got this negative face and your countenance changes. And some people you're like, oh, I better not approach that person. They don't look too friendly. They might blow up at me. And then how does that impact the unit? People don't even want to sit near such individuals, and people end up sitting in their own misery. And you find a lot of men that are like this, and they constantly complain about their lot in life instead of changing, instead of doing things to change their lot in life. And many of these men go to voicing their opinions on the internet or on social media. There are people like in that I think it was in The Dark Knight where Alfred said some men just want to see the world burn. And so they put that perspective out there that the world is shit, that things are terrible, you don't understand how bad things are. And then when you experience a little bit of a negative impact, which can happen to anybody from day to day, the Bible says that unforeseen occurrences can befall us all. Maybe you come across the wrong person. Maybe you come across the wrong woman. Maybe you didn't vet people that wanted to come into your life, and instead of keeping them at a distance till you got to know them, you immediately brought them in and you had this entire negative experience, and now you remember what that person said, and then you're like, oh yeah, he was right or she was right. And that's why it's very important, as the Bible says, who will be a guest in your tent? When referring to when the psalmist was referring to God, who will you allow into your space? And it talks about those type of people. And I encourage you to go read that in the book of Psalms where it talks about that. What type of people, what type of company will I keep? The type of company that you keep can change how you feel about where you're at from day to day. Just like how my experience of being around people who are enjoyable to talk to can completely change how I felt about the work environment. From loving it and wanting to be there and come to work and I had a great time and take care of patients, to the point where I had literally had to leave the state to go find work elsewhere, especially after the pandemic, since I didn't take the jab. But it's one of the main reasons why the Bible talks about in depthly about be careful who you associate with. Be careful who you associate with. And of course, that association can be found close through the internet because we don't have to be directly in the vicinity of somebody. We could be seeing them across the internet, and their mindset, their view, and their perspective on life can have an impact on us, especially if you're going through a negative patch in life. Maybe there are hard times. And of course, like the Bible says, if you hang around wise people, you will become wise. But if you hang around stupid people, then you will feel bad. You will fare badly, as David said in the book of Proverbs, or Solomon, I should say, said in the book of Proverbs. And so it's important to keep that perspective in mind. Some people, I've watched a lot of different content creators, especially in the red pill space, and we start to see more and more of this negativity. And so it can color your perspective from things being a little bit of a problem to consuming your whole viewpoint. And so I don't look at a lot of it as a man who works primarily in a female space. I don't really see those type of problems, and I'm not the type of person to shrink back from voicing my opinions. And where things don't go the way that I want them to go, And if we can't come to some sort of an agreement that you will go your way and I'll go my way, and it won't impact the work environment. If it comes to that point, well, I just say it's time to go, and I move on to the next one. I don't get too hampered about worrying about, oh, I work at this particular place, and this particular place doesn't do things the way I want them to do, and if that doesn't happen, then I'm gonna burn the world down. No, we just move on. Just move on. There's opportunities. We live in a world of an abundance, and unfortunately, when you live in a world of an abundance, sometimes it makes people lazy because they think it just should. Like we should just be able to. I should just be able to afford, etc. Because we see so much, and so well, you still got to go out there. You still got to go out there and take it. And for many men nowadays, because they don't feel like we live in this time period of where everything is industrializing and it takes men to build all these things. No, we've already achieved all that. Now there are other things that can be built up, things that can be built up for you personally. There's still plenty of work out there. There's plenty of work. I see it myself when I go online and I look. There are a lot of jobs on there. There are a lot of things that people can do. Save up money, start a business, go to school, get educated, take in a trade. You can literally cross the country back and forth and in different variety of fields. But if you just want everything to get dropped into your lap, then that's not going to happen. We don't live in that sort of an environment. And we also don't live in a sort of an environment where the constant need for men to build is there. If that's what you're looking for, well then go to a developing nation. If that's what you want, go to a nation that is developing and offer your services there. And you'll be able to get that fulfillment of working in an environment and working the camaraderie of working with men and building, etc. Or go to another state where that's a need. But a lot of people don't want to do that. They're so comfortable and stuck where they are that they refuse to put forth any sort of an effort. And I say the same thing about relationships. If you don't find, you know, people take what goes on in the city, and I'm like, I've worked in the country where in New York City, most of the nurses were single, but I worked in Nebraska, North Dakota, when I worked in Arizona, most of those nurses were married or had serious relationships at a very young age. Most of the women that I worked with when I was in Nebraska and when I was in North Dakota, most of those women were young. They were in their mid to early 20s, and they already had boyfriends or were married. So you see, it's a very different perspective than the women in New York that are perpetually single until they die. The women who live outside of the cities, not so much the case. But when all you focus on is that perspective of women are shit and all they do is sleep around, and it's like, have you been outside the city? No, because that's all you're focused. That's all that you're focused on. And then you spread that mindset. Then you spread that mindset to everybody else. And then you get men who live more in the suburbs and in the countryside start to adopt that mindset because it plants the seed in the brain. And then eventually it transfers its way to the heart. And people perceive a different sort of a reality than the reality that is going on. More importantly, for a reality that they didn't even create for themselves. It was a reality that was given to them by somebody else for whatever reason. Maybe that's your life, but it's not mine. And that's why there's some people who will look at the system and say, oh, it's slavery and they're keeping us down and the white man. And then you'll see another person, same skin complexion, but they're flourishing because it's a mindset. It's a mindset. And that's why the Bible says to beware of those people. Beware who will be a guest in your tent. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.